Hello, my name is Thomas. Welcome to British Culture, Albion Never Dies. This week, inside the House of Commons, interview with an insider. The insider is called Ursula. We worked together in China years ago, and she is one of the best people I have ever worked with. It was such a pleasure to reconnect, especially for this episode. And she had previously worked at the House of Commons, working for a Member of Parliament. So I asked her about what led her to work at the Palace of Westminster, how it felt to enter the mother of all parliaments for the first time. We talk about the day-to-day routine and what ultimately led her to move on and work in East Asia. I am very glad she did, as that's how we met. It was an absolute pleasure, and I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. She is an absolute star. I have been asked to talk about a couple of other things about my trip to the Palace of Westminster, but I'll talk about that after the interview. Okay, Ursula, thank you very much for joining me. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. It's great to be here, Thomas. So, yeah, my name is Ursula, and I worked at the House of Commons from June 2010 to October 2014. And yeah, I'm here today to talk a little bit about what that experience was like.
Thank you very much. And what first led you to work at the House of Commons?
Well, I studied politics at university, so I guess it was always something that I was interested in. And I guess had hoped to work there or work in politics one day, not necessarily at the House of Commons. I guess it felt a little bit of a pipe dream. I'm from a small town outside Belfast in Ireland, so not a lot of people are heading off to work in the House of Commons. But when I eventually ended up in London via Sydney and Leeds, I found out about a website called workformp.org. That's literally its title, and you can just apply for jobs there. So that is basically how I ended up working there. But yeah, it was something that I'd always been interested in and wanted to do.
And it sounds like you're the first person in your family to do such a job, or perhaps the first person
Oh
from your
yeah,
town.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of people get into politics and either as MPs or working as staff. Usually, maybe they volunteer, they do internships, maybe they know somebody who already works there. That's how a lot of people get into it. But yes, exactly. I didn't have any of those kind of connections, so it was just a case of looking online, applying, and yeah, got lucky,
So the
I
first
guess.
time you walked in, it really was all new to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never been there on a school trip or anything like that. So, yeah, going in the front doors, it was my first time, and
You've never even been
yeah, I
around as a
suppose
tourist.
no, I hadn't been around as a tourist. Yeah,
So the
no.
first time you walked in, this is your home, this is your job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, exactly. So, I had been working in a job which was in the kind of Victoria area of London, which was obviously close to Westminster. So I would have walked past it and kind of looked wistfully at it and things like that. But yeah, no, day one, I had to go in and go through security and yeah, start working there. I joined, as I said, in June 2010, so that was just after the election in May 2010. So when an election happens, MPs have to, when the election's called, everything stops in Parliament and they have to sort of clear out their offices and they sort of start over when they come back after the election. And so the MP that I was working for at that time, he was newly elected. We were spending the first, I guess, month in a sort of big committee room in the actual Palace of Westminster.
All right.
So yeah, that was great. So I went in through the security at Westminster Hall and walked through St Stephen's Hall, which used to be actually where the House of Commons sat when it was much, much smaller, across central lobby to like pick up the post and then head up to the committee rooms to where our desks were at the time. So yeah, it was very fantastic, like first few weeks. It was like, really living the dream, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, starting with the most historic parts of the building.
Yeah,
as you
absolutely.
started your work.
Yeah.
Wow, and that must be really interesting. You were starting normally when I start a new job, I've got somebody experienced who's looking after me. In your case, you started the new job and your MP was starting his new job.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Exactly. So I think in a way it helped us. We bonded there, I think, over our both of us not knowing anything about it and having to work it all out. And there are a lot of sort of little aspects and rules and things about Parliament that you have to find out, and the only way you can find out is by being there. And there was things like, the division bell rings when there is a vote.
Hmm.
And so we're always like trying to keep an eye out on the debates in Parliament to see when the vote was likely to happen, because the MP has to get there within a certain period of time to be marked in for the vote. If they're otherwise they're marked as having abstained, and the party whips would not be very happy if that happened too often. So yes, it was important to learn all of those kind of little things as well. And when we actually finally got an office, the parliamentary estate is made up of three buildings. So the old Palace of Westminster, then there's a very new building called Portcullis House, and then next to that is another building called Norman Shaw North and South, which used to be Scotland Yard, and that's actually where our office was, but it's the furthest away from the Palace of Westminster. So it was especially important to keep an eye out and make sure they had time to run from one part of the estate to the other.
Oh, I see. So it starts to get into your routine. You start to get into the day-to-day of the timings.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. It was something you sort of keep an eye out for. You had to look at the schedule for that day of what was going to be debated, and you can kind of get a sense of how long things were likely to last, and and then sort of give him that kind of heads up. So yeah, maybe not schedule meetings during those kind of times and that kind of thing, just to be aware of that. So yeah. And then of course, you had Big Ben chiming quite regularly. So
it goes on every kind of quarter hour, is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and I didn't live too far away from Westminster at the time, just a bit further down the river. And sometimes in the evenings, the wind might carry the sound of Big Ben. So it was a little bit like, oh God, cannot
it's work
escape.
Following me.
Yeah.
When you were working there, did you start to make connections with kind of other people doing similar jobs? I'm wondering if you were kind of closeted with your team, closeted is the wrong word, or whether you were starting to build connections and alliances, or did you find people to help navigate a new environment?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It sort of lends itself to that. A lot of people, they're in the same boat and they're sort of looking to make connections and network and all of that kind of thing. So people did talk to each other, and then they would introduce you to someone else that they know. And I've been lucky then as well to make some really lifelong friends that I met there as well. But even sort of next door to us, they're not the offices aren't split along party lines or anything like that. So there was our office, and next door to us was the office of a team from the MP from another party. But yeah, we got to know each other, and they brought us round cakes and things like that when they were having cakes in the office. So it was all very good fun.
I think a lot of people when they're watching Parliament, they see, say, Prime Minister's question time. I think that's the one time that everyone sees, and it is, known as the bear pit. But a lot of commentators, but then they are going out and sharing cakes. They do get along.
Oh yes, absolutely. And I think exactly. Even the MPs themselves all get along, and they have to do the same. They've got to build those alliances and network and get to know each other, and so yeah, we did the same thing. Yeah.
It reminds me that when I was a manager in a company, we both know, if I wanted someone to talk to about my problems, I'd talk to my opposing manager in the opposing company. And people are sometimes a bit shocked, but you're rivals, you're from rival companies. And I'm like, he understands the pressures I'm under because he's doing the exact same thing, just Absolutely. For another banner.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's like the good point about it, because it's at the end of the day, it is a job. You do have to go in there, you do similar tasks and you're doing this sort of same thing. It's just maybe the content's a little bit different, or but yeah, we're all doing the sort of same thing. We're all trying to get the same goal, and
Yeah.
so yeah, they really can understand like what it's like, and yeah, a lot of bonding over that. Yeah.
I asked you just earlier about, your first impressions going in, but of course you did work there for a few years.
Mm.
And any place of work becomes, routine after a while. So I'm wondering how, once you were in your stride, once you got into it, what was that routine like?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of became very second nature, that is definitely for sure. And I guess maybe the first year was a kind of a learning curve. And like I said, I was new, so was the MP that I worked for was new, so we had to learn everything, firstly,
Mm,
about how everything worked. And actually it was also at the same time, I think IPSA, which is
mm,
the new way that expenses are handled, that was also new. So there's a lot of different things that were happening initially, and so that was a real learning curve. But then once we got past that, we got into a nice routine where we knew how everything worked. We knew what we liked, knew what way we liked to do things, and then it sort of became very, I have to say, plain sailing. Like, um, it was just, I mean, it was just a really, fantastic job. I never had any of that, people talk about on a Sunday night dreading having to go into work the next day or anything. It just was never like that. It was
mm,
a really just fantastic job I felt really comfortable doing. And also it's the kind of job, of course, that, you're making a difference, you're helping
mm,
people. We're getting like all sorts of queries from constituents and things like that, trying to do our best to help them. And then on the other side as well, our MP had a lot of causes that were very close to his heart and things that he was interested in. And we were doing like a lot of, research to help, maybe like speeches or articles that he was writing about that. And so you're coming at it from those sort of two sides, like that kind of grassroots part with the constituents, and then also this like wider policy aspect as well. So um, it felt worthwhile and an important
yeah.
job. But like I said before, at the end of the day, though, it was still a job. You still had to go in there and do this kind of day to day, and and so yeah, it was. I mean, there's not. I mean, I guess it was just going into work, and
Yeah.
you checked your emails, and you did your filing, and all of those sort of mundane tasks that everybody
Mm.
has to do in their job. That they were also a big part of our work too. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm really interested. It's obviously long hours. You can see that walking past Parliament, the offices have the lights on late, and there are people working there. But you're satisfied you're making a difference.
Yeah, and actually, I would have to say myself, though, I didn't have to do long hours. I did 9 to 6 and finished every day at 6 o'clock and headed
Oh,
off into central London to watch a play or have dinner with a friend. Um,
you had a
and
good
actually, the
boss.
MP that I worked for, yes, exactly. And he actually said to me that it makes me, that he felt relieved that I was able to leave the office every day at 6 o'clock because it made him realize that everything was under control,
Oh,
that
that's
I
good.
wasn't having to work until 9 o'clock or whatever just to keep a track of things.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, he definitely worked late, and Parliament often sits late.
Mm.
But I guess the role that I had as a kind of like office manager meant that as long as I had my stuff done, then I was able to leave. And there was no expectation that we would all sit around waiting
Okay.
until Parliament went to, yeah. So yeah.
You didn't have to wait till the boss went home.
No, we didn't. There was none of that. It was like, see you later. Yeah. So,
Well, good, good. And it sounds like to me, a surprisingly supportive environment.
yeah, absolutely. I think, as well, obviously, you hear so many stories from other offices and that kind of thing. And I would have to say that the way our office was run was definitely one of the most professional of all the MP's offices. You have to think about MP's offices. They're kind of run almost like little mini businesses. They're all sort of run individually.
Mm.
You work directly for the member of parliament themselves. Um, so how they want to set up their office, how many caseworkers they want to have, if they want to have researchers, they're they've got a budget and they're able to decide how they want to spend that.
All right.
So they're all set up just a little bit differently.
Mm.
And so yeah, no, but our MP was very much like, we had to have regular appraisals. We had to always have done at least, before we had an appraisal, we had to have like at least two training courses that we'd been on
Oh,
for each appraisal. So I think I was doing like four, or at least four training courses every year. So there was a lot of like about development and growth, a lot of talk about, okay, what do you want to do next and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I have to say it was an incredibly supportive working environment.
that's fantastic. You had your continuous professional development as you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, that is fantastic.
Mm,
At,
yeah, we were lucky.
at some point, you had to make the decision it was time to move on there,
Mm,
and I'm very curious to understand that process. What what made you decide?
yeah. Well, I guess it's one of those things. It's more kind of London related. So I'd worked for 4 years, just over 4 years, in Parliament. But before that, I'd also worked for 2 years at a think tank. So it's kind of like a little bit related to politics as well. And so that was 6 years in London. And for anyone who has lived in London, they'll know it has a little bit of a shelf life. It's a very fast-paced city to live in. It's an amazing city to live in.
Mm.
Um, but there's kind of comes a point where you have to decide to stay or go. And
Yeah.
in my role and things, I'd kind of gone up as far as I could go, as we talked about with the development. I'd been promoted and all that, and that was it. So I could either stay where I was in the hope that the member of parliament that I worked for, that his role would change, and then therefore maybe opportunities for me. Or I could sort of take control of it myself and kind of decide what did I want to do next and where did I want to go. So, being the kind of person that I am, I had to take that control myself. So, so yeah, I had to make that decision. But I actually ended up telling the member that I worked for. I think I gave him about 9 months
Oh
notice
wow.
that I was planning to leave. Yeah, because it's just the kind of relationship that we had that
Mm.
I could always be open with him and talk to him about this thing. It was definitely more of a life decision, not related to my job. And so that's why I was able to talk to him about it. I told him when I left, that I would never have worked for any other MP, and I was going off, as you know, I did my teaching qualification in Australia and then went off to Asia to teach. So completely different career. But yeah, exactly. So that was kind of how I ended up deciding to move on.
And now we're looking back.
Yeah,
Do you often look back on this time? Is it something you think about?
I do, especially since I've come back from Asia. So that was sort of summer of 2019. And I kind of got plugged back in again to politics because I guess when I'd been over at the
Mm.
other side of the world, I kind of just lost track with it a little bit, and I wasn't as interested in what was happening in thousands of miles away. So, but when I sort of came back, you start to hear it more in the news cycle. You can't avoid it. The people that you're talking to at work, your friends, they're talking about obviously politics and things a lot. Um, so yeah, I sort of got more interested in it and sort of think about my time, and especially, the member that I work for, maybe sometimes they might come up in the news and then you'd get a
Mm.
text message and someone's asking you about, so you're like,
I try and resist
um,
that.
yeah. But I'm always happy to talk about it because, yeah, like I said, it was
Yeah.
a really fantastic time in my life that I,
Mm.
look back on. And if we're talking about, yeah, how I look back on it, it was a dream come true.
Wow.
Not many people get to do it. And I did, and I had a fantastic experience doing it. And not just, while I was there, but I guess, I learned so much
Mm.
from the member that I worked with. I completely changed as a kind of colleague and employee from working there. It gave me the kind of confidence and that I could go on and do whatever I wanted and not happen to be go to the other side of the world and teach English with not knowing anybody. So yeah, and just a belief in myself that that I can do whatever I set my mind to. And it's something that will stay with me for the rest of my life. So um, yeah, I can't thank the member of parliament enough, or I'm so grateful for that experience, I have to say.
Thank you very, very much for sharing your experience with us, and it's great to hear that it is so positive. Um,
Yeah.
so you hear so much. Has it changed the way you view the news? When you see the news, do you see it in a slightly different way?
Yes, absolutely. I have to say, and especially, when I also see people commenting on Twitter and other social media, they talk about these people like they're not real humans, and that
Yeah.
they don't have families, and that they're not, and I think we do like forget that aspect of it as well. But yes, I think also, when how the media might portray
Mm.
a story or something like that, and you're like, well, it wasn't quite like that. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's definitely given me I'm also grateful for, yeah, that be able to see that two sides, and
Mm.
so I take most things now with a pinch of salt, and I try to encourage other people when they're like, can you believe this? And I'm like, well, actually, there might be
Can you?
another side to that story. And yes, can you believe it?
And perhaps to get into very silly territory, but for example, in the 90s, we had House of Cards in the UK. There's all kinds of political dramas. I'd watched it. Yes, Minister. Is there any kind of political drama you enjoy, or has it ruined it for you?
It actually has ruined it for me. So I used to love, love, love a show called The Thick of It.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, which was a great comedy show, and I would really recommend it to any of the listeners out there to go and find it. But then once I started working in politics, I was like, oh, no, I can't. And it wasn't that even that there were like obviously Malcolm Tucker is a famous character from that, and he's like so mad. But it wasn't like you were reading any characters like that, but you could just see the grain of truth in it.
Hmm.
And also, being reminded of work is not ideal. So,
So you can't go
and
home
I'm
and
trying to
watch it
like
because it's more work.
unwind, and it's like, yeah, exactly. It's like, oh God, yeah, that reminds me of when we had to go to that meeting, and it's terrible. Um, so yes, I don't. I know I can't watch any sort of um
Well, that's
political
interesting, but
show
you can't see it
or
because of the grain
yeah.
of truth, or you can't see it because it's ridiculous.
Oh, I think it's a little bit the grain of truth, and yeah, and then because then it maybe will remind you of something, or yeah, and so you're like, no, I'm trying to like decompress, and
Ah, okay.
yeah, um,
Even now, you wouldn't watch it because it's kind of.
yeah, and well, yeah, maybe I haven't tried. I'm almost like too afraid now. I've kind of like it's been so long, but yeah, so maybe if there's an like yeah, if there's a new one that comes out, I'll maybe give it a go.
Okay,
But I can't. Yeah,
just
we could try
curious.
new things. Yeah, let's be busy. Yeah,
Okay, yes. New adventures ahead anyway. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
well, thank you very much for sharing your adventure with me. I really, really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we go?
I'll tell you one fun thing that happened actually when I was working there, which was um, that when I worked there, William and Kate got married, the now Prince and Princess of Wales. And as anyone will know, when you're watching any kind of royal event, weddings, or as we saw, of course, with the late Queen's funeral, you'll get a lot of well-wishers lining the streets. And so the footpath outside of Parliament is reserved for people who work on the parliamentary estate during those events. So they had a ballot that you could enter to get a ticket to be able to go and stand on the footpath outside and kind of wave as they went by. And so me and my friend, we won tickets in that. So we were able to, on the day of the wedding, uh, wait there and see all of the members of the royal family go by and get lots of great photos. And then we ran upstairs to our office, watched their vows on TV. And then once they'd done that, then we made our way across the city to Hyde Park, where they had a big screen, and everyone was there having like picnic, champagne, so you could watch the sort of kiss on the balcony and all of that kind of thing. So that was a lovely moment, which I would never have had if I wasn't, even if I was working in London, I don't think I would have
Mm.
been sort of lining the streets and queuing up for hours to do that. But we had a perfect like view and everything from there, and yeah, it was a great memory.
Wow. Well, that really is special. Again, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you, and must have you back one day.
Thanks, Thomas.
See you later. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Ursula. I really enjoyed interviewing her, and this interview was partly prompted by me visiting the Houses of Parliament for the very first time, going inside last weekend. It was a very memorable weekend. I went down to see some family. Really enjoyed my time. I celebrated Pete Brooker's birthday at a party, and I asked on Instagram whether you'd like me to talk about this, because it'd been shared on a few different channels, from Tailors of Love, for example, the podcast and the YouTube. But people voted yes. So you asked for it. Z, Jack, Thomas, Pete, Dave, Shane, Ray, Michael, Matt, another Matt, CJ, Alex, Oceanographer, Bonds, Basement, Russell, David, Purdy, A Very English Institution, Leaz007, Nick, Matthew, Jazzy and Rose, Angela and Adam. You all asked for this, and for the one gentleman in Australia who didn't want it, well, you can stop listening now. It was a very memorable party with some really interesting Bond fanatics. We all got together and watched Octopussy at a private screening in Chiswick, a nice little cinema, a 20-seater, I think, and it was certainly pretty full, meeting some people who I've only seen on YouTube. One gentleman, Calvin Dyson, who I've been watching on YouTube for years. So quite funny to meet him in real life, and very pleasant. It was just such a fun, interesting group of people, and I don't know what more to say about it than that. It really was a pleasure. I then was invited by a gentleman you may know on Instagram called Do You Expect Me to Talk, who guided me into the Palace of Westminster and showed me around. And I have to say, it was a dream to have a look round and to stand in the place where Charles I was put on trial for treason, to see where the MPs just go to have lunch, to stand in the foyer where I had the House of Commons on one side and the House of Lords on another, to see the beautiful mosaics. And also, it's a very ancient building. Of course, a lot of it goes back, say, 150, 200 years, but the building, the main foundations and so on, goes back so much beyond that. That for me it was a bit like visiting a cathedral. The smell of one of the old halls was exactly like some of Britain's ancient cathedrals. It was, I say, a striking and affecting visit, and that is partly what led me on to do this episode. Also, because my previous episode was S is for satire, so I talked about many comedy takes on British politics, and that was my main focus, although I also talked about satire in Turkey and satire in the Far East. But yeah, I really wanted to go into kind of the more serious side of it in this episode. That episode, S is for satire, was actually, I think, the first episode I've ever done where I've had a couple of people reach out to me saying, hey, you didn't cover this, because what I didn't cover is Monty Python. I didn't cover Monty Python because, honestly, it didn't occur to me that it was satirical. I don't think of it as satire. I think of it as surreal comedy, which is quite different. If, of course, I was to cover all British comedy, that would be longer than half an hour, and it would be quite a deep dive. But a gentleman kind of engaged with me. I'm not saying who it is. I don't want you hunting him down. It's somebody I know and like. And he was saying that it's kind of satirical on society, which I can see, I can get. But of course, if I did that, I'd get into more observational comedy. I might be talking about, say, Billy Connolly or Michael McIntyre. I think they definitely have their own special place. And perhaps in the future, I will have a look at Monty Python, especially The Life of Brian, which is, among all the things they did, perhaps one of the more satirical and the more interesting things they did. So I just thought I'd touch on that because if you request it, I'd do it, and if you want me to follow up, I generally will. But that's what led me to do this particular episode. Going to see the Mother of All Parliaments was a remarkable experience. It has made quite an impression on me, and as I say, one I'm still processing. So I had to reconnect with my friend Ursula and get a real take on what it's like to walk down those halls every day. I really hope you enjoyed it. We may return. to this topic again. Really hope you enjoyed it. I did. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.